Give a minute here or two for the folks to trickle in.
Hey, Deborah,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know, I just sent you an email
Yes.
to you and the team, just letting you know that the revised foundation document link,
Is it working?
it's not working. It's just routing saying not page not found on your website.
Thank you. I will fix that, Adam. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
Good afternoon, folks that are just joining us. We appreciate you being punctual and here on time. We're just going to give it a minute or two for folks to get settled and we'll get rolling. Okay, looks like we've slowed down, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad to see you all back today and the full house that we have here on the Zoom. We're really excited about the program that we put together for you today and look forward to furthering the discussion and the ideas that we started in Albuquerque together last month, sorry. We're going to go ahead and launch the slide. So I am Kathy Boyce with GridWorks, Director for the Interior West, and I'm joined by my colleagues Margie Tatro and Deb Shields, also with GridWorks. And we're going to run through just what we're about and drop the agenda in the chat and we'll get started here. So Deb, if you could roll to the next slide, please. So our objectives today, we are here to discuss and hopefully finalize the project foundations. This is the draft document that we shared with you all a couple weeks ago and received some red lines back. We're here to learn about grid readiness for electrification and from both a cooperative perspective and an IOU perspective. We'll also hear from Troy Cucciara from about New Mexico's housing stock and the status of ability to take on electrification needs. And then last piece of the agenda for today is to elaborate on the barriers for New Mexico building decarb. So building on some of the initial ideas that we talked about in the afternoon at Nuevo Atrisco. Since this is our first time meeting together on Zoom, if we could spend just a minute talking through some Zoom norms, and I suspect that this is probably pretty familiar with this at this point, but for the purposes of our group, if I could ask you to please mute your mic when you're not talking. Maybe raise your hand when you wish to speak or use the chat. And then when you are ready and addressed, please go ahead and turn on your camera when you are talking. During the presentations, if we could ask you to please hold your questions and we will provide some time for Q&A and just stay centered with the speaker at the time, and then we'll move on to questions. And please be respectful in your comments. Recognize that we are a big group here, and so look forward to hearing your ideas, but also ask that you leave some time for others and just make sure that we are hearing from many voices in the Zoom room today. And then you'll notice that we are recording. So if you do decide to speak, please recognize that that recording, we will have that file, but that is only for our internal note-taking purposes, not something that we intend to post or share, really for our record keeping. And we do have quite a few new faces. So last meeting at our kickoff, we did spend quite a bit of time getting to know each other and sharing priorities, hearing about from different organizations. But I'm going to ask for those of you that are new to the group, just those of you that are new, if you didn't join us in May, to please turn your camera on here and introduce yourself. So if I could ask you to offer your name, your organization, and one thing that you want to explore in this project.
Hi, my name is it okay to go? My name is Carl Ulibarri. I am, my company is NM Home Solutions. I'm a green energy consultant. I'm currently working with the Santa Fe Community College and the Energy Smart Academy on training initiatives for weatherization agencies, as well as the new tax credits and the energy auditor requirements that are going to be tethered to that. So I'm just looking for, this is my first meeting, so I'm just looking forward to participating and providing any resources I can.
Thank you, Carl. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Michael Barrio, and I'd love to come off camera. I'm just driving from another meeting to another. But my name is Michael Barrio. I'm with Advanced Energy United, and we are a clean energy trade association that works at the national level, and I oversee policy and engagement for Arizona and New Mexico. And I'm also chairing the building electrification table for the Energy Foundation Coalition in New Mexico. Looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome.
I'll jump in. My name is Alaric Babe. I'm with PNM. I'm actually presenting today, so that's why I'm here in the group. So you'll hear from me later. But I oversee our energy efficiency program, our transportation electrification program, advanced technology such as broader electrification and marketing. So there's a lot going on here. I think this is really exciting. I think electrification is really the key to broad decarbonization. So just thank you for everything that you do, and look forward to listening to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Alaric. We appreciate you jumping in and presenting to us today.
Hello, I'm Carmen Campbell. I'm with New Mexico Rural Electric Cooperatives. I'm sitting in for Cherie Swanson, our CEO, who could not be present today. But our one thing is just making sure that all the electric co-ops are at the table for important energy matters.
Thank you, Carmen. Welcome.
I'm Amy Miller. I'm sorry I couldn't make the last meeting. AMM Consulting here in Albuquerque, and I have a variety of different clients in the energy space.
Thank you, Amy.
Hey folks, Angie Poss here. She, her pronouns, based in Albuquerque. I own a consulting business called Single Space Strategies, and I'm here representing my client, the Energy Foundation. Thanks for pulling this all together.
Thank you, Angie. Welcome.
Kara Lynch, and I'm an attorney for the Coalition for Clean, Affordable Energy. I work on various matters involving our utilities, and I'm involved in energy efficiency, transportation electrification, and broader electrification initiatives.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Christian Casillas. I'm with the Coalition of Sustainable Communities, New Mexico. We work with local governments around the state to support them in reaching their sustainability and climate goals with a focus on equity. And I'm looking forward to participating. I also wasn't able to make the first meeting. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Christian. We appreciate you joining us. Okay, I'm gonna keep going here. Thank you. Lots of new faces. We appreciate enlarging the group here. And I'm going to reiterate from our first meeting that we encourage the consistency in the regular participation. So for those of you who are new, I encourage you to take a look at the webpage and look back at meeting materials and summaries so that you can get up to speed, and hope to see you regularly. I think that's going to be very important as we build this conversation and build the initiative and the actions for the roadmaps. So please stay with us. Then moving on to the agenda briefly, it's in the chat there for you. You might want to pull it up if you have a second screen available to you. So working through welcomes here, and then we're going to spend some time on the foundation document and do a little bit of breakout rooms and hopefully bring that conversation to a close. Then we will move on to a presentation by Mr. Luis Reyes, CEO from the Kit Carson Cooperative, to hear how Kit Carson is getting ready for electrification in the residential and small commercial space. And then similarly, we're going to, as a complement to that, we will hear from the 3 IOUs panel that Margie is going to lead for us. We are hoping to provide a full 10-minute break for everybody. We'll see if we're still on track, but recognize that need to push back from the Zoom for a few minutes. And then we will come back for the Mortgage Finance Authority presentation from Troy Cucciara and end the day with a pretty good, hopefully a fulsome discussion and brainstorm to expand on the barriers to building decarbonization for New Mexico, and have you wrapped up and done by 4 p.m. We will hold to that end time. So I would like to move on to the next slide. And in addition, so meeting recap from last meeting, we had over 50 stakeholders at our first meeting representing 34 different organizations. We heard from Senator Heinrich as our keynote speaker, where he encouraged us to find on-ramps for customers and to adopt a crawl, walk, run approach that we can consider here as we move towards actions. We heard from Puck Stare with an overview of programs and policies at the State Energy Office. We spent a fair amount of time hearing from each of you to get to know you, hear your priorities, and overlay that with what we had put forward as an initial project vision and scope. Many of the themes we heard there: affordability, customer education, braiding of rebates and incentives, programs that are community driven and community based, resilience. So many of those themes we hope to fold into the conversation today. And then we took the tours for Nuevo Atrisco with the lived experience on a sustainable campus, and brainstormed some opportunities and barriers in the afternoon of our kickoff meeting, and that will provide the foundation as we work today. And then again, the webpage there for you, use that as your landing page if you want to go back and see summaries, attendance lists, materials, reading materials. That is your first one-stop shop for materials for this effort. So then I'm going to also, what we heard at the kickoff meeting was some feedback from you all. So if we could move on to the next slide. One piece that we heard from many of you was a desire to learn from each other. And so we are putting forward a program showcase at our next meeting in July. And the idea here is a 2-minute lightning round from those who are interested that want to share work that they are doing in their organization on building decarbonization. So if you have a really exciting program or outreach that you would like to do, or to educate the very deep pool that we have represented here, this is your chance for just 2 minutes. We don't need slides. We don't need a lot of detail, but a chance to network and hear what else is going on in the state. And I'll come back to that at the end of the meeting here of how to go ahead and sign up for that. Another piece that we heard from folks was a desire to hear other perspectives that were not in the room at the kickoff meeting. And those included labor, builders and architects, tribes, and New Mexico Gas. We have done further outreach. Many of those groups we had already tried before the kickoff meeting, and with many of your help, thank you, providing us connections. We have done additional outreach to try to bring those voices to the table. I think you'll hear in the room today on buildings and architects, have more representation there. Labor and tribes in New Mexico Gas, please know that the invitations have been extended, and the outreach efforts, we continue to have that as an open outreach and welcome those voices. At this point, have not been successful in identifying folks to participate. As far as meeting structure, in the poll that we did at the end of meeting 1, we did hear loud and clear that folks would prefer a hybrid. That's the bars there, that very large bar of folks' preference for hybrid meetings. And then the pie chart, a strong preference for in-person, if when we do another in-person meeting, to host those in Albuquerque. So just reflecting back and letting you know that we appreciate the input and the feedback for us, and that we were folding that in as we work on our meetings in the future. Okay, so we are ready to move on to the next item on the agenda, and this is the foundation document. So Deb has just dropped into the chat there for you a link. I understand there may be a little trouble pulling that down from the web page, so it's there for you. You might want to pull that up if you have a second screen available to have that accessible. So what has happened here? We asked for the edits from the group and sent that around by email and received probably about a dozen red lines or suggestions, changes that we have now incorporated into this next iteration, this revised foundation document. And what you'll see here is we've incorporated many of those edits. We've adapted in some cases, and in some cases we elected not to take, and I will address those as we go through. So I want to walk you through what you'll see in front of you, and then we're going to ask you for your reactions and your input to these changes. And I know we are spending quite a bit of time on this, but we feel as a team that it's really important these are the core questions for this effort to make sure that we all have a common understanding of what we're doing and what we're about. So on the goal statement at the top there, we dropped in the operational and then the last clause, prioritizing low income. And those were direct recommendations from stakeholders. We felt those were helped to be precise and to really zero in on our language to focus on the operational emissions and our target audience. You also see we had a suggestion for a date. We had just a placeholder originally, a recommendation for 2050. So to give you a little context there and to see how that date sits with you and feels from your perspective, Governor Lujan Grisham has set a long-term target of reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions for the state by 2050. And then, of course, the Energy Transition Act that is specific to the utility sector, that sets a zero carbon resource standard for IOUs by 2045 and for rural electric co-ops by 2050. The recent Priority Climate Action Plan, this is in response to the EPA grant money that was spearheaded by the Environment Department and the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, pegs building specific measures to 2030 and 2050. And so we thought the 2050, we put this in here for your reaction, recognition that electrification investment can be high in the early years and may need some time to adopt and spread out those costs. So putting mid-century as a goalpost here, look forward to hearing your thoughts and your feedback as we get into it. Then the group charge, just one little change there on item number 2 of including interim targets. On the defining building decarbonization, added boilers as an appliance there. And then the last sentence, renewable energy improvements may also be a part of the building decarbonization strategy. So recognizing the complementary benefits that renewable energy improvements to the building might bring for building decarbonization. And many of you probably saw that DOE recently, last week, released a guidance document on defining building decarbonization. And what we have built here is very much in line with that definition from DOE. So I was pleased to see that and look forward to your thoughts. And then moving down to the last section on the scope, added in medium, small and medium commercial, and then added in building requirements. And there was some give and take here, some hesitation given the uncertainty at the federal level on building codes. But we also heard another viewpoint that is particularly for new construction, that building requirements should be considered in this effort. We also had the suggestion under the DERs, the distributed energy resources, to take out the second clause here of where there are synergies with building decarbonization. We elected not to take that, and that was a deliberate response on our part that recognized that we are focusing on operational emissions for the building, and that DER is that complementary piece that can also help, but as an optional piece to it. And then on the out of scope, we heard from a couple folks that all 3 and then the 4th, the water consumption, that those should also be considered in this effort. Recognize that all of these elements are important to the broader effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and that life cycle analysis, but also realize we are 6 meetings in 6 months, recognize the stakeholders that are working on this and really primed and able to speak to operational emissions. If we were to move to oil and gas or embodied carbon, we would need a completely different stakeholder group, or certainly need to supplement and enlarge the effort. So to keep this manageable and us moving forward and making progress, we put the footnote there of recognizing the need for all of this work and outside the scope of this project. So while you're holding that revised document, hopefully on your second screen, Deb, if I could ask you to move to the next slide. So what we would like to do is to ask for your reaction here. What is your reaction to the revised foundation document, and are further revisions needed? So we're going to take 15 minutes and put you into breakout rooms. So you're going to get moved around here by Zoom. We'll do that on our end. We are asking, once you get placed, to choose a timekeeper and a reporter. Discuss your reactions to what I've just presented to you, these red lines that you see in the revised document, and then report back to us, your reporter. I'm going to be calling on you, so please be ready to summarize for us the discussion for each of these 4 categories and share with the group. And our hope here is to see if further work is needed, or if we are all on the same page and that we can agree that this foundation document fairly represents where we are headed in this effort. Questions before we put you into breakout rooms? Okay.
Kathy, I'll just add for folks, just be sure you are self-facilitating this. So please take charge, someone, and help the group tackle those questions and capture inputs that we can hear back from you here in a few minutes. Thank you.
And so let's say back at 1:35. Okay, Deb, if you want to give them the countdown for 1 minute to close the rooms, please. Okay, welcome back. I think all our rooms are back. I dropped in on several of them. Thank you all for really engaging and sharing your ideas. So the question before you, what is your reaction to the revised foundation document, and are further revisions needed? What I'd like to do here is take a few minutes to go round robin from each of our reporters from the 4 rooms and hear from you. Any changes? If not, thumbs up, we're good. Let's keep moving. So on the goal statement, if I could hear from breakout room number 1 reporter.
We spent the majority of our time on goal statement 1. Some of the amendments that we made was to, the most direct one is to put a period at the end of 2050 and then move the rest down into the interim goals. Because if you have decarbonized, the low income and in the commercial sectors, you would have reached the first part of that goal statement. We also talked about the importance of setting interim targets, and I know that's specifically listed down below, but we also talked about maybe mirroring the ETA interim targets, just to have some consistency. We also wanted to add the word all before operational. And while our group talked about the importance of prioritizing low income and due to the energy burden, we also wanted to make sure that our strategies also tackle that lower to middle income group of people, because they tend to not be able to access the same rebates and incentives to actually do the things that they want to do. So there's this whole group of folks who will do the actions themselves, but don't have the support to do so. And then we liked the eliminating the emissions by 2050, but it really depends. Where the rubber hits the road is really on those interim targets. Team, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure was aired in this space?
Okay, thank you, Alice. Breakout room 2. Reporter.
Kathy, I don't actually remember which breakout room that I was in, but I am the reporter for our room, and I'm wondering if I was grouped.
I think you were. Yes.
Okay. All right. For the goal statement, we didn't spend that much time on it, but there was just a general agreement with how we incorporated the prioritization of low income into the low income residents into the language. So just a positive comment on that. For the group charge, we spent a lot of time.
Can I ask you to hold? Let's just go on the goal statement and hear from groups 3 and 4, and then we'll come back to group charge.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Thank you. Yep. All right, group 3, reporter, please.
I also don't remember what group number I was. So
Christian, I think
we were 3, Christian. Yeah.
Oh, Okay, all right, good. For the goal statement, we mostly talked about the last piece, prioritizing low income and historically marginalized groups. And there was a comment that greater definition is needed there. How do you actually prioritize these communities if you don't have any way of explicitly identifying them? And so there are many examples right now with the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and other federal programs that use specific language such as low income, disadvantaged, and tribal communities. And then they use certain tools like CGEST, which I forget what that stands for, Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, to identify those particular communities in New Mexico or anywhere. So I think that was one of the main pieces that we talked about, that there could be more work in fleshing out that language, maybe to match language that's being used in many other federal programs right now that come along with certain tools for identifying those communities.
Great. Thank you, Christian. And breakout room 4.
That would be me, I believe. So for the goal statement, I think the only thing that really came up was trying to avoid maybe too much jargon and keeping in mind, is the goal statement meant to be completely internal, or what's going to be communicated as the kind of charge, or sorry, not the charge, the goal here, and to make sure, we're not using gatekeeping language or anything that would prevent folks from understanding what we're actually trying to accomplish.
So, I want to address that one as a clarifying question, that the intent of the goal statement is that this would be the North Star for this group to really guide our work and to give us a sense of where we are headed in developing this roadmap. I don't know that it will necessarily be used in a broader communications or any growth beyond the roadmap, but for this group to be on the same page as a North Star for the work that we are doing together. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so sounds, from what I'm hearing from the group, 2050 sounds like that is palatable, with a recognition and some interim goals, and we'll probably hear a little more on that in group charge, and a little more definition on low income. So sounds like we're getting close. If we could move on to group charge. Alice, I know you'd already shared one with us. Is there anything to add?
I guess I just want to clarify that we were going to add a low income group to the goal statement, but it's more around the strategy in which we prioritize our work more in the group charge component. So, and there was a lot of talk about also including our, that we have a lot of small commercial buildings and they make up most of our building stock. And so, there's a trade-off. There's a strategic approach that we could employ that, yes, prioritizes some of our low income folks, but also addresses the sectors that are ripe for action. So using implementation timelines also as a lens for prioritization.
I just want to build on something Alice is saying. A couple people in our group pointed out that because of the rebates focusing on the lower income tranche of New Mexicans, there's this lower middle income group, that would really have to leverage their credit in order to move some of these residential concepts forward. So needing to attend to that lower middle income group that's not eligible for direct full 100% rebates.
And you're saying that group should be folded into an interim target to prioritize?
I think what our group was saying is both of those things need to happen, because if the goal is full decarbonization by 2050, then we've done it all. So at what point are we focusing on the lowest income New Mexicans, lower middle income? I know, are those time related? The short-term urgency of climate change means we've got to do a whole bunch really fast by 2030. So is that, like we say, we have decarbonized the home of every, this definition of low income folks in New Mexico by 2030, and then by 2035 we've gotten lower middle income, and then hopefully during that time the wealthier New Mexicans are just doing it themselves. So it doesn't make sense to link the prioritization to the 2050 goal, because the 2050 goal, at least right now, sounds like we've done it all. So in what time frame are we prioritizing lowest and lower middle income folks? And we did sort of link the urgency of lowest income and lower middle income because of the energy burden and just health impacts to being in a really hot or really cold house.
Thank you, Camilla. Group 2?
So for the group charge, we spent a lot of time on bullet number 4, which is the communication strategy. We wanted to include language that emphasizes not just the need for communication, but also for engagement, and the need for this engagement and communication strategy to secure broader agreement. So we did sort of needle the language a little bit and drafted a revised version. Obviously, it's just a draft and we can incorporate it however we will, but I'm just going to add it to the chat for easy reference, Kathy. But the revised version reflected those 2 changes. That's it for us for the charge.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to pull that in from the chat. And that is something I think this group probably needs to talk about as far as communications and taking the work forward of who, how, and what vehicles. So I appreciate the input there. Group 3.
We didn't discuss group charge.
Okay. Thank you. Group 4.
Yeah, I think the group charge, similarly, we didn't get into detail there.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And we will take a look here, but sounds like we are moving towards, with a few tweaks. It sounds, at least on the group charge, that we're in a pretty good place. Moving on to then definition. Group
We
1?
did not have time to discuss this one or the next.
2?
We just had one comment, and that could be either for the definition or the scope. It kind of depends on how we interpret it. But there was a comment of how this project is going to be addressing homes with wood and pellet stoves, not necessarily with gas stoves, and whether or not that should be articulated here or in the either in defining building decarb or in the scope section. That was our only comment, and that for the rest of the document as well. So
Okay, so an additional appliance to consider. Okay, thank you. Group 3?
We had a lot of discussion around the delivery of electricity, the sources of electricity for the appliances. So the first 4 sentences here all seem to imply that the grid is delivering renewable or clean energy. And if you're defining building decarbonization, it seems like up front, you need to, it would be important to explain that decarbonization happens only as you're going to electrifying appliances if the grid source, if the electricity source is clean. And then there was conversation about kind of the different ways about going about that at the distribution grid level, or the as well, kind of the very distributed energy resource rooftop level. And it was pointed out that it felt kind of like an afterthought by saying may also include renewable energy improvements to a building. And so that there kind of seemed to be some subjectivity there. So maybe thinking about rewording the final sentence and putting up front defining the electricity source needs to be clean, and that can come from the generation source on the transmission level, the distribution grid, or the building level. And folks in my group, please jump in if there are additional thoughts on what I just shared.
Okay, so on-site versus the various avenues of on-site or off-site sources. Thank you. And 4.
Yeah, I think for the definition part, the one thing that came up was whether or not there should be some reference to energy conservation in addition to energy efficiency, if that has a role to play in building decarbonization and within that definition. And as well as, I think, right sizing equipment in this whole process.
Okay. Can you tell me a little more about right sizing the equipment? What was the discussion?
I think it was just more about it's one thing to decarbonize, say, by electrifying everything in the building, but if it's oversized, you're not necessarily maximizing the benefits that you could have. So if your heat pump could have been smaller, or your and that's the immediate example that comes to mind, or your water heater could have been smaller because of other changes you made to the building, or because of other efforts you make as the occupant, that has an economic and environmental benefit as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I know we're well over on time here. So Luis, thank you for your patience. I want to finish this through. Group 1, if there's briefly any thoughts on scope?
We did not discuss scope.
Okay. Ran out of time or just didn't get to it?
Both.
Okay. Group 2?
That the wood stoves thing was the only thing that was on either scope or definition.
Okay. Thank you. Group 3?
We didn't get to it.
Okay. And 4?
There was generally support for what was in scope and out of scope. One question that came up around water consumption is in the situation where a household or building might be on a well, in which case, though, reducing water use does have a direct end use impact on the buildings.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. If you feel like your comments in your breakout room were not captured here on these exercise notes, please drop us either a chat or an email and give us your feedback here. I think we are pretty close, a few tweaks on some of the wording and the definition, the interim targets. We will take this back as a team to consider and hopefully finalize and have that written out for the group so that we all are very clear on what we're about and what we are working towards. So at this point, Luis, thank you for your patience. I'm going to move on to item number 3 in our agenda and open the floor here to welcome Luis Reyes, CEO for Kit Carson. Luis has been at the helm at Kit Carson for over 20 years, and I believe has welcomed in, correct me if I'm wrong here, 29 rural communities and 2 Native American pueblos to fiber to home and broadband projects. And he's also provided a vision and leadership to offer a variety of services, internet, renewable energy alternatives, and low-cost propane. So Luis, I've asked to address demand growth expectations and electrification readiness within Kit Carson, and maybe some broader observations for rural New Mexico. Luis, thank you.
So thank you, Kathy. And yeah, it's a pleasure to visit with the group. I would like to invite at some point Carmen Campbell. She's on the call, and she is with she represents the other cooperatives in the state. But as Kathy mentioned, Kit Carson Electric is a co-op in North Central New Mexico. Have about 30,000 members, serve Taos, Rio Arriba, and Colfax County. And a few years ago, our membership wanted to basically be more green, more renewable. And so we went off that venture and created a distributed energy model to make sure that every member of Kit Carson would get renewable energy. And today we have what we call 100% daytime solar. We've integrated storage so that we can start building a resilient network, and we'll continue to do that. And we have other energy projects that we're working on. And so we really are, our membership is really big on how do we decarbonize, how do we electrify the grid, and really address for our membership climate change issues that are impacting our community. And so we started with the co-op taking the lead as far as what I just mentioned. But the reason we've gotten there is we've had a lot of member engagement. We didn't do this just because we thought it was a cool idea. We wanted to make sure the members were in tune to the type of power they wanted, type of services they wanted, and have more say in their power supply. And so as we've moved forward, now we get into kind of the member side of the equation, which is electrification of transportation, electrification of homes and businesses. And so we've started on that path. The co-op has installed about 50 EV charging stations around our network. And now we're working on how do we start electrifying or finding the tools to electrify our members. We serve Taos, Rio Arriba, and Colfax County, relatively poor communities. So these are not communities that there's always a thought because we live in Taos that it's a wealthy community. It's not as wealthy as people may think. And so how do we engage those low income? How do we engage the two pueblos to find the value of electrification? Given we do have some challenges with basically our network. First, electric co-ops, at least Kit Carson, we have a lot of long radial feeder lines that go into rural areas. It wasn't really designed to put a lot of electricity on the lines. You know, the concept of rural electric co-ops was basically to give us the basic electric services because no one else wanted to serve. So I think what's obvious is Kit Carson lacks a lot of the infrastructure to really electrify big pockets of the area. So we've got into what is called right sizing, where we don't put the very fast chargers. We put a charger that fits into that feeder to make sure that we don't overload the system. We do the same thing with our solar. It's a DER system. So we have a lot of 1 and 2 megawatt facilities versus big 100 megawatt facilities to serve our load. So we have those infrastructure challenges. We've been basically able to accommodate those by right sizing, and that gives us time to plan and then determine what kind of growth are we going to see, how fast are we going to electrify. We still have a lot of people in northern New Mexico that heat with wood, that actually cook with wood. They have wood burning stoves, and so those folks are not going to change right off because the rest of the world is. And so you have that one of the challenges. The other challenge is we're a tourism economy. So given that we have this migration of locals moving out, people moving in, and we have a big housing issue. And so what that brings with us is a lot of locals don't own their own homes. And so we're trying to figure out a way, and one of the challenges is how do you get someone who's a landlord to electrify their home while keeping rental prices affordable? Because anytime there's an addition to the home, then you have extra cost. And so we're trying to work with basically local government of how do we address those challenges, given that you have an economy that really doesn't have a lot of good paying jobs. And so we've created a housing board to try to address that. And in that housing board, we're also trying to address what are the policies or the codes that municipalities have to start to address if you want to really electrify. You know, one of the issues in our co-op is you have a lot of homes that don't have the adequate service entrance to accommodate electric stoves. You know, since I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of wood burning in our area, still a lot of propane, and then natural gas. Right now, only about 15% of our members use electric heat. And so we're also trying to figure out how do we encourage contractors and developers to embrace the idea of electrification, which again is a challenge because they have the way they want to build. The folks that are moving in, big, large second homes moving from the metropolitan areas, where putting natural gas is kind of the first priority they have. And so again, a lot of what we're trying to do here is really just educate our members about the benefits of electrification. We're working with Taos County they just want a seed award of $2 million so that we can start doing some energy efficiency appliance change outs targeted at the low income so that we can lower their energy burden. And we want to start, we have an idea of starting to work with Solar for All to see if we can start getting some solar and storage on low income homes so that then we can start replacing gas appliances with electric appliances. We don't think it makes any sense to really just swap them out without an additional renewable resource to offset the energy burden. All that will happen is the cost will go up on the electric side, and these folks are already struggling as it is. So even having a lesser gas bill doesn't really solve the issue. I think we have here at the co-op, we're trying to bundle packages together, energy efficiency with solar, so that we get the biggest bang for our buck. We get more electric appliances in the home. And plus we make the members part of the kind of the energy transition solution that is a one for all type of approach than just a co-op doing it or a mandate from the state. So kind of in the spirit of time, I just wanted to put that's what Kit Carson's doing at a high level. And then Kathy, if Carmen from the statewide association that represents the other cooperatives, if she has any comments, so that the group gets a statewide view of the co-ops, I'd appreciate if she would have some time if she wants to.
Thank you, Luis. Carmen, while we ask a few questions with the group with Luis, I'll let you think if you would like to address and some of your observations on demand forecast and readiness for electrification. So why don't we take a couple questions from stakeholders first, and then Carmen will circle back. So folks, if you have questions for Luis, maybe put your hand up. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Luis. I'm just waiting for there we go, camera to come on. Is there plans for Kit Carson to offer, outside of working with Taos and the seed grant, to offer rebates for heat pumps or other like insulation or things like that to help offset the cost of those projects?
Michael, there is, but we would have to go, the way we want to finance that is go through the regulatory process. of creating a energy efficiency fund. And under the current rule, I believe we can add to the bill 1% of bills, so we can have a fund that people can pull from it. The only way I believe it's going to work in this area is really through a grant type of program. I think Camilla mentioned it earlier. Low-income credit issues are hard, so the only way we're going to get people in a position that they are comfortable and they're electrified is to offer grant type of programs that will enable them to do what is good for them. So we are, in our next rate case, we're planning to do that. Ironically, we tried to do that the last rate case, and we had some members that didn't want to help. So we have an education process we have to do here at the local level to make sure that what we're trying to do, it helps low income, but the bigger picture is really we're addressing some climate change issues that would impact our economy. You know, we're a ski outdoor economy. We're a ski economy, and if you don't have any snow, we don't have any economy. So we are looking at those programs. I failed to say earlier, Kit Carson's losing. We grow about 1% a year, mainly because since there's not a lot of opportunities in the north, we have a lot of folks leaving, a lot of our generational families leaving, and they're being replaced by second homeowners. So that they don't really bring a lot of electric use because they're only there a couple of weeks out of the year. So it does put some pressure on us to develop these programs because we have loss in population.
Luis, do you see that 1% growth staying pretty constant through the end of the decade, or do you see that accelerating?
I do see it accelerating. We have set up, Kathy, different groups with some of the major players like the town and the county about how do we build resiliency, how do we build programs to electrify, or at least to get to net zero. So I do think there's now a community effort to grow our load for what benefits that business, right? So I do see it grow, but we're not going to grow it based on just normal, your kids, they graduate, they build a home, they go to college, they build a home. We're not going to see the way it used to be in rural areas. It's going to have to be by us putting programs together and really getting the community to align on this mission of electrifying for the greater good.
Thank you. So we're gonna do Stephanie, Alice, and Adam, and then Carmen will come back to you if you want to offer a few thoughts as well. Steffi, you're shaking your head. Are you wanting to bring your hand down?
No, I was talking to my husband, sorry. I learned today in another meeting that Tri-State is got a huge USDA RESP grant. And I know you're not part of Tri-State, but I'm always curious why the individual co-ops have not applied for either a REAP grant or RSEP grant that I know of, or have you?
So we haven't, Kit Carson hasn't applied for this last grant. We've applied for REAP grants. And we've actually applied for, we've helped commercials apply for REAP grants so they can put solar on their businesses. So we have done that. Kit Carson has become more an enabler. If that's what the member wants, then we want to enable them to get there. I do think, as I was talked earlier to a group, we get to the point where now we have too much solar, so now we need to enable to get more storage. But I really think that if a member wants renewable energy on their home, we need to figure out a way for them to get that without it being detrimental to the system, which is excess. So we have applied for those. I am not in a position to talk about what Tri-State or the other co-ops are doing because I really don't know. But we try to chase all those programs. Steffi, as I mentioned, once the Solar for All comes out, we want to be able to participate on behalf of our low income to see if we can get some solar facilities on their homes.
But for the RSEP grant where you do on-bill repayments, right, do you do that too?
We haven't looked at it, and I think one main reason is co-ops really have, including Kit Carson, we have small shops. So everything that we're doing, we do with very limited resources. So we just, you know, we're at capacity with the programs we have now. So I don't think it's that we don't want to do them. I think co-ops just are limited in their capacity. We just don't have a lot of employees to do all the things that maybe the bigger investor and utilities can do.
Thank you. Alice?
Hi, I was hoping, Louis, you could touch briefly on, because I know the biggest thing that happened for you to become solar and have a cleaner grid was that you were able to break your contract with Tri-State. And I was hoping you could just quickly go over that process and what it would take other cooperatives to do the same.
So thanks for that question. So really it was a member-driven decision. Our members, you know, with Tri-State, we had 5% is all we could do. And when we left, we had about 4%. We couldn't do any more projects. So we had a lot of member meetings. We explained to them kind of pros and cons of going that way. But once we got to the go, our board went forward. We had to pay a $37 million exit fee. We paid it in 6 years though. We decided we're gonna, do it. And so from 2016 to 2022, we paid it off. In the same time, we built 44 megawatts of solar. And so pretty simple part. It was simple in the sense of once the members said do it, then it kind of gave us a green light to really do what we needed to find the right partners, the financing. We worked planning and zoning. And I think, as I mentioned, our members wanted solar in every community, right? They wanted their own. So then it was easy. So we have 18 to 20 of these facilities around the Enchanted Circle. We have one at Picaris Pueblo, and now we're working in Taos Pueblo. In fact, Alice, it hasn't stopped. Even though we've said we have too much, people have really seen the value, at least for our community, of being able to choose your own power source and being able to tout how clean we are. So it really was a grassroots effort.
Thank you, Luis. And Alice, I might encourage you maybe offline if that's an issue you want to explore. I think we're going to kind of redirect back to the building decarbonization. Thank you. Adam, thanks for your patience.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I was just curious to get your perspective on kind of the building requirement side of it, because you'd outlined some challenges about what Taos kind of sees, and it may or may not be unique to just Taos, but is that by that makeup, what would be your perspective on changing the building code requirements to not just make the buildings or any new construction to be EV or solar ready, but to actually mandate that the new construction includes EV and solar? Because as a construction person, we all know when you're talking about cost, when you're building the building, that's the cheapest time to essentially integrate these technologies. And so I'm just curious, if you were king for a day and you were able to wave the wand, do you think that building code, I guess, change would affect Kit Carson? And how could that maybe positively or negatively impact your guys' kind of trajectory under those circumstances that you outlined?
So Adam, I do think the codes need to change to at least accommodate EV, solar, whatever renewable resource you want. I think the code has to address it. I don't know if it has to be mandated. I still believe that the member has to have some choice, and it's up to me running the co-op to convince them that electrification and solar is good for them instead of mandate. I take a different view, though, that I think we need to get more vetted in storage. I think storage is going to be the key to resiliency. Storage, we're a nighttime winter peaker. So I need electricity at nighttime in the winter, not during the daytime. So mandating solar without storage only gets us halfway there. So I think they should be renewable ready. But I think if anything, my perspective is we should put more focus on storage and resiliency, because I think solar is going to be built anyway. I think over time, Adam, solar has been more accepted as a resource that is kind of normal now.
I guess just kind of following up, and I'll keep it short for other folks, but to the point that, let's say that as I'm a developer, right? I'm going to put in bare minimum, and so how would Kit Carson essentially, or if I was a second homeowner or something, I'm building for as cheap as possible, that's just by nature. How are you going to encourage me to get there unless it is mandated? And maybe it's not solar, maybe it's storage or whatever the case may be. But I'm just kind of curious. It sounds like you guys are actively trying to incentivize folks, but you're still having challenges. So I was just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I think you mandate it by the size of service, right? It has to be at minimum 200 amp service. I don't think you mandate the resource, but you mandate the ability to put solar on the home through the size of service.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Daniel, I see your name up, and I also recognize Carmen. Carmen, perhaps we could invite you back at another meeting and have a chance to also provide your perspective for cooperatives, gives you a chance to also maybe put your thoughts together, if that would be all right.
Okay, and if not me, I'm sure Sharice would be more than happy to speak to that.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate your flexibility. Daniel, could I ask you to put your question into the chat perhaps, and maybe Luis can address it that way, just in the interest of staying somewhat on our timeline here.
Yeah, I was actually just going to react to that last question. And it's a very quick one, if it's okay. I just want to let folks know that the capacity stuff has been addressed in the code side. That new construction has to have those circuits in. But I could say from building, especially affordable multifamily housing, for a segment of people who are, going to be very, like literally none of them in the last complex I built have an electric car. It is a huge cost to put on an already really expensive development sector. And so, like, I just want to reiterate, what Mr. Reyes is saying in terms of, making sure that we have the capacity to do it later. And even maybe thinking about, locations and things like that of how you do it to have it be cost effective to add chargers later. But the burden right now is that, the cost to build housing means we have very high rents on new construction rental housing, and anything that we add into it is going right to consumers and is going to hurt them. So we need to figure out paths here that mean we have the flexibility later, which we've built into code in terms of the size of service and having dedicated circuits for this stuff later so it can be added, while not pricing more and more people out of housing. So I just wanted to react to that.
Thank you, Daniel.
And
all right, at this point, Camilla, I'm going to hold. We really need to keep moving. So I'm going to hand it over to, I apologize. I know we've got a big group here, but we have 3 folks waiting on the IOU panel that I want to hand it over to Margie. So I appreciate your patience. Luis, thank you very much. We appreciate your insights and your participation here. And as you can see, a lot of interest and excitement for what you are doing. So I'm going to hand it over to Margie to move us on for the IOU perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Luis, and everyone for getting us on the conversation about electrification, especially from a rural location. What we are doing next is we've been delighted to have 3 experts from each of the New Mexico investor-owned utilities join us to share their perspectives on electrification challenges. And so I wanted to just quickly point out some context for this panel segment and tell you how we're going to conduct this. First of all, Kathy already mentioned today the Energy Transition Act, which describes the goal for carbon-free electricity by 2045 for IOUs and 2050 by electric co-ops. I'd like to point out there's an important clause in the Energy Transition Act that says that as long as safety, reliability, and impacts to customer bills are considered in achieving this goal, and that is something the IOUs and the co-ops take very seriously, I know. Also, the investor-owned utilities, the IOUs, do long-term plans. They examine various scenarios related to demand in their integrated resource plans, and PNM and Southwestern Public Service both completed updates to their integrated resource plans just last year, and El Paso Electric will be on tap for doing that in the next in 2025. Also, from the New Mexico residential facts, I thought might be interesting from the United States Energy Information Agency data of 2022, that the average retail price for electricity in the residential sector in New Mexico is 14.1 cents a kilowatt hour. In terms of energy sources for home heating, 63% of our homes in the state are natural gas heated, 7% heated by propane, and 22% from electricity. And I thought it was interesting to note that 85% of New Mexico homes are air conditioned, but I think that number is going up as we're all experiencing these increased heat waves and heat experiences. So 2 key issues for the electric infrastructure include not only generation capacity, but also the distribution infrastructure itself and its ability to do the delivery of electricity. As Luis was pointing out, in the rural sector, some of the distribution lines are limited in what they can do in supporting additional load. So that's just a bit of a context I thought you would all be wanting to know about. The next slide then introduces our panelists. I've asked each of our investor-owned utility representatives to talk about how the utility is preparing for electrification growth of residential and small commercial customers, to describe the challenges associated with that, and then also to get the group thinking about any actions that are needed to happen to support more of this electrification. What are those actions so that we can take those into consideration as we're doing our work on the roadmap? The next slide then, I've asked each representative. We've got Brianne Joel from Xcel Energy, Southwestern Public Service. We've got Jesse Gonzalez from El Paso Electric, and Alaric Babij from Public Service Company of New Mexico, to share 2 slides to give you their perspective of what's happening within their utility. We're going to ask you to please hold your questions until the question and answer period. And I imagine, based on the interaction with this group, we may run out of time for questions, in which case we'll capture those in the chat and follow up with our utility experts to get back with you on questions that we don't have time for. So it's my great honor to introduce Brianne Joel from SPS and the Xcel Energy team. Brianne, if you're on, would you please come on camera and share with us your perspective?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Margie. So I am for SPS, I am the distribution planning manager for our Texas and New Mexico region, so strictly the SPS territory. And I wanted to just start off with a little bit of a baseline for the SPS footprint for where our energy sales go and how that actually, kind of plays into the generation and into the emissions on the state. Just kind of to level set a little bit on where our focus really has been lately is, if you look at the industry perspective of adding to the emissions and that emissions percentage in the state, you're over 50%. And then if you kind of take us then look at our sales mix, we're 76% industrial. So the most of that is going to be our oil field in Lee and Eddy County. We serve just about all of those counties, with Lee County as well, right? But we have a bulk of that through there. And that's where a lot of our energy sales are going. And if you look at our IRP information, a lot of our demand growth and our generation needs are to electrify that industry, and then making sure that we're doing that reliably and as clean as we possibly can. So, and then the small portion of that is our small commercial and our residential. And then the other is just kind of lighting municipalities, schools, items like that. So if you want to go ahead, Margie, to the next one. So I really just wanted to talk through kind of the residential impacts as we go through electrification. There was a lot of focus on low income, and those are actually the customers that are impacted the most as you go to electrify. They're usually in older homes that have not as great efficiency, older windows, things along those lines. So as you shift to, let's say, electric heating as their main heating source, it's less efficient to be electric from like a unit of energy sense from natural gas. And then with the loss there, we see giant spikes in areas that are already all electric. And it kind of poses a challenge for us as you look to electrify areas that aren't used to seeing those peaks on the feeders. So you're used to feeders and transformers that are seeing summertime peaks, and that's kind of what you're used to. As you shift that into a winter peaking model, the spikes differ differently, and then your feeder impacts and where you can transfer load throughout your system becomes a lot more challenging. So as we begin to electrify, you've got to upgrade your panel, you've got to upgrade your service, you now have to upgrade your transformer. Then your secondary size too small, we've got to upgrade there. Now your primary wire is too small. Now your feeder is too small, right? Now your substation is too small. There's not enough of them. Your transmission lines aren't big enough to be able to take your renewable energy and bring it into your city centers. Now you don't have enough generation on your system to be able to accommodate different types of peaking systems. And so I think Louise put it well, is that if we shift that peak to a wintertime peaking system, it becomes very difficult when we're typically a summertime daylight peaking system when we make that shift on our side. So really, as we begin to electrify those, the amount of customers that are impacted, it goes beyond just your, let's say, if we focus on low income and then move to a middle low income, your customers across the board are going to be impacted because the nature of feeders doesn't just serve low income. That feeder could span across, the entire stretch. It could span across low income to high income. It's not solely dependent on just that one particular area. And so slowly that cost of service now increases for everybody across the board if we're not strategic and provide time for the change, if we push too hard too fast. So think about where, if you think about a residential neighborhood that has, no one has EVs and everyone's on gas heat. If we make those transitions at the same time to now the customer model is to charge your car at your home. Now you're wanting overnight. Now you're wanting to heat your home every night. And now we've increased that peak on our system, changed it and moved it to a point in time where we need to have either storage to accommodate that or another type of renewable energy in order to address that. So that's really kind of the couple of things that I wanted to hit there. The other thing for us as Xcel Energy or an SPS, we operate inside of SPP. That's the Southwestern power pool there. And so that's our transmission, our regional operator. And they're on the path to create planning reserve margins for summertime load and wintertime load. A little bit of this is reactionary to Winter Storm Uri, I believe, but we're looking at moving from a 15%, I think today, summertime reserve margin to a 16%. It's going to have a bit of an impact, but not be terrible. But then they're looking at imposing up to 36% planning reserve margin for our wintertime. So if we have that large of a planning reserve margin to be able to accommodate these extreme cold prolonged events, but now we've moved our peak to that point in time, the amount of generation needed to support that level of a planning reserve margin has now drastically increased. And it's just something that we need to be conscious about as we look at setting building standards and building codes, about doing it in a thoughtful way that doesn't unnecessarily make the change happen faster than what the utility can react to, and also at the right price point for our customers. If we move too hard, too fast, it's not going to be affordable for our customers anymore. Margie, I think you're still on mute.
Thanks, Brianna. I appreciate you giving folks the context of the whole system. So thank you for doing that. I think we'll go on to Jesse, but there may be questions for you, Brianne, about are there specific actions or suggestions that you would have for the group as we consider a roadmap and electrification? You talked about the transition happening all simultaneously, but if you have specific ideas of what kinds of things should be considered as action, we'll come back to you on that. Thank you. Jesse Gonzalez from El Paso Electric is also here with us today. Jesse, would you like to go ahead with your perspective?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Jesse Gonzalez. I'm with regulatory and governmental affairs, so the expert moniker might be might be a little bit misleading, but nonetheless. But with respect to El Paso Electric, when we talk about utility preparation for electrification growth, I would pretty much echo Brianne's sentiment in terms of from a grid mod perspective, just kind of some of the infrastructure investments that are going to be necessary as electrification adoption rates increase. But currently, the company kind of looks at what it's currently doing now is obviously looking at load growth and reliability, because those are the primary factors that drive the need to expand primarily the distribution system. Currently, the company is really engaged in the deployment of advanced metering infrastructure, AMI. And we kind of feel like this technology kind of offers quite a bit of synergies with respect to electrification in general. For the company, obviously, it'll enhance our data accuracy, operational efficiency, and customer service, and also gives us a window in terms of adoption rates. I think for the company, that's really the key. Currently, we also do a lot of system hardening and resilience. Obviously, perpetually, there's annual investments in system hardening measures. We're perpetually engaging in infrastructure upgrades to increase loads and withstand extreme weather conditions, and making improvements in with respect to reliability. And once again, just to reiterate, load growth and reliability are the primary factors. Another item, obviously, is the integration of emerging technologies. And so right now, the majority of our load growth really does consider the impact of EVs on a long-term basis. So once again, we would really need to have a window or a better idea of the adoption of electrification and its impacts on the system at large. But in terms of EVs, we're obviously developing managed charging programs for residential customers and optimizing charging times, right? Once again, we're talking about coincident peak, and we have quite a bit of utility scale renewable resources. But obviously, once the sun goes down, we have that drastic ramp in terms of needing to meet load without those particular technologies. And Margie, you could go to the next slide. And some of the challenges that the company or the utility is facing is really it really pivots on electrification adoption rates. As Brianne was kind of indicating, that like we really need to have a better idea in terms of, is it going to be like a exponential spike, if you will, or it's going to be a gradual adoption? And just the pace and the location of electrification adoption is going to be critically important in terms from a grid mod perspective. Kind of as has already been mentioned, we would need to be looking at upgrading feeders, transformers, and other components to handle the increase in loads as well. And so, and a lot of it really kind of in terms of adoption rates really pivots on what are those costs that are going to be associated with infrastructure upgrades and the new technology implementations. So the company is perpetually looking at that is to try to balance the investment with our available capital from a utility perspective to make sure that the grid itself can support this electrification. And this is kind of something that's been spoken to quite a bit about customer adoption and awareness. So the utility is actively looking at, like really informing customers about the benefits and options for electrification. And as we've mentioned before, in terms of the upfront costs and so forth, kind of sometimes being a deterrence and EVs, et cetera. So we're very cognizant of the overall cost to our customers, obviously. But In terms of necessary actions, policy and regulatory support, I think, is critical. In terms of like the company, we have like various different planning horizons. So I think like any shifting policies kind of throw a wrench in terms of from a planning perspective, and making sure that there's enough capital being allocated to these emerging technologies or to be able to sustain electrification. So I think that's extremely critical. In terms of innovation and pilot programs, I think as a company, we're looking at new technologies that support electrification, once again, such as AMI and other distribution kind of controls, if you will, and customer engagement. And I think we've had roundtables as well, kind of addressing the various challenges affecting like the different customer segments. So I think those are some of the things that we would also think are relatively important from an information perspective, is to really truly educate the public at large in terms of what's available. Can you stack programs? What are the utility offerings as well, in terms of like kind of taking a holistic view to support electrification.
Thanks, Jesse. I really appreciate your suggesting some of these actions that would be supportive of electrification. And that's a really good input for us to consider as we're putting together our roadmap. Let's shift now one more. I've saved the Alaric Babbage from PNM to the last because PNM has the largest number of residential customers of the 3 IOUs in the state of New Mexico. And so, Alaric, if you are willing to go through and share some of your thoughts with us at this point, I'd be greatly appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I like going last because I can let the other experts say a lot of things that I don't have to go over again and again. First of all, it looks like my slide somehow got formatted wrong. Environment, the environment on that one is a little aggravating to the perfectionist inside me. But so let me just, what I wanted to do, I know that we were asked to talk about building electrification, specifically residential and small commercial, but I want to focus on a couple of things. One, about how we think about electrification at PNM, and two, what's the potential for electrification that we see. So first and foremost, PNM is a big supporter of beneficial electrification. I've stolen these 4 guiding principles from the Beneficial Electrification League. I couldn't really improve on them that much. But when we think about beneficial electrification, we want to save consumers money, benefiting the environment, either improves the product quality or quality of life for the customer, and fosters a robust and resilient grid. So it doesn't have to do all of those things, but those are criteria that we use when we're thinking about what would we support in terms of electrification. So for example, you're not going to see me go out there and say, everyone needs to go install the baseboard heating from the 1970s because that uses a lot of kilowatt hours. Electrification is not simply about trying to use more electricity. It's about trying to pick the technologies that meet one or more of these 4 criteria, and really move the ball forward. And so I just want to make that clear. When we're talking about this, we're really thinking about the customer experience. How is this better for the customer, for the environment? How does it help the grid, which in turn helps all customers, or simply saves money, which is most noticeable in our energy efficiency programs. This second slide, this really colorful bar graph, is one of my absolute favorite charts that I use again and again. It's getting a little dated at this point, unfortunately, but this is from the Energy Information Agency, I believe. And what it looks at, this is on a global basis, but it's looking at the different sectors and the amount of energy and the source of that energy per sector. And then you see that thick black bar that sort of zigzags across it. So above that bar is currently non-electricity, so typically different types of fossil fuels. Below the bar has already been electrified. And so, as you heard from all the other utilities, and I'll be no different here, even though we're talking a lot about building electrification today, EVs keep coming up again and again. And the reason is because of this chart. So you can see, at least back in 2015, again, this has changed somewhat today, but the potential for electrification in the transportation sector is far and away where we have the greatest potential to electrify and decarbonize. And so that's why that comes up, like, because the cost is there, the technology is there, it's meeting a lot of those criteria for beneficial electrification, and the environment and the potential to benefit the environment is there. And so that's why this comes up a lot. And so I just wanted to level set with everyone. It's not that utilities are not also focused on building electrification, be it residential or small commercial. But when we're really looking at potential and what we see really hitting the system hard and fast as of today, this sort of helps focus where we are. So moving on to the right side of the graph there, you see the residential and commercial sectors. Really what we're focusing on is space and water heating in both of those. And then the other can be lots of interesting things like induction cooktops or all the other electrical gadgets that we have. And so electrifying some of those. And so that's really when we're talking about building electrification, those are the technologies that we're going to focus on. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I wanted to keep this really high level. There's challenges and there's opportunities, but I also want to focus on what PNM is already doing today. So I've thought of this more of like, what are we doing today? What's happening tomorrow? So we might already be working on it, but you might not totally see it yet, or be able to get your hands around it. And then on the horizon is both challenges and opportunities that we see in the sort of in the medium to long term. So today we do have increased heat pump incentives. Those are actually very, very popular right now. So that's really exciting, right? Heat pumps are incredibly efficient and they do tick all of those boxes for beneficial electrification. So through our last rate case, some of the stakeholders did make a case to increase those incentives, which we then did, and those are being very, very popular. And so we expect to see a lot more of that today. Another thing that I don't know everyone knows about yet, but we have already launched our all-electric homes pilot here at PNM through our new construction program. There's about 10 or so homes over in Rio Rancho that have been built to be all electric. So this is for the space heating and space cooling actually as well. Of course, we have a heat pump. There's also a heat pump water heater in the homes. Everything in the home is electric without any other fossil fuel connection. So really exciting to see that and see how the customers like the quality of life over time. We do also have induction cooktop rebates, as I mentioned. This is something I think really exciting. Because again, this is where the technology is there. It can benefit at least that indoor air quality, and is better than the old sort of coil electric stoves. I had one of those in an apartment for years and years, and really disliked it. And induction cooktops is finally able to merge the benefits of control that you have with gas with the environmental benefits and the ability to cook on the induction. And then of course, appliance rebates. We have lots of appliance and other home products rebates to help customers save money through our energy efficiency program. So a lot of this electrification is already happening. Most of it today, at least on the building side, lives within our energy efficiency program, but we're looking at ways in the future about how do we expand that? Can we think about other ways to electrify? As far as tomorrow, so this is that stuff we're already working on, but maybe you haven't seen yet. We are working on workforce training. And just to talk about some challenges I've heard anecdotally from a number of customers, they want to get a heat pump, but when they talk to a contractor, they're turned away and they're provided either a gas furnace or just a typical air conditioner. And that's because still maybe for some of those contractors, the technology is new. So we are actively working with our trade allies. I think that the increased heat pump incentives work. And so trying to get them trained up on heat pumps and what the benefits are and get more and more people ready to install and service that equipment. Really, really exciting here is stacking those state and federal incentives. Of course, no one on this call is a stranger to the IRA rebates. I will give a shout out to our friends at the state who are working really hard. I believe they said Q3, they expect some of those federal incentives to be coming through. Electrify America has Rewiring America has a great electrification roadmap. And so we expect to see more stuff there. Again, working on market transformation that goes through some of our midstream programs we have with cooling, helping to bring down the cost of the more efficient units, and again, push those out to customers. Inclusive financing, there's 1,000 ways you could split this one, but making it easier for customers to purchase what might be a more expensive unit up front, help them either finance that over time or bring down the cost up front. That's still a challenge, right? Trying to do that. On the horizon, grid modernization, I think, was mentioned by some of my colleagues here as well. This is something that we're looking at all the time, helping to modify the grid or modernize the grid to accept a lot of the new loads that are coming on and actually manage that. I really see our role as managing this load, continuing to deliver safe and reliable power to our customers. Policy. I'm not a legislator, so I won't go into that. You all on this call, I know many of you are well aware of policy, but policy changes to help support and promote beneficial electrification, ways that we can eventually get that technology out to consumers is going to be key here. Just general customer education and awareness. Everyone on this call probably knows what a heat pump is, but I'll bet you if you stop 10 people on the street and said, what's a heat pump? You might get 2 people that would have any idea. So really doing a lot of outreach, educating people on what it is, what the benefits are for all of this technology. I mean, heat pumps are one thing. Induction cooking is like I'd always just call it the magic plate because enough people saw the infomercial. But it's like a magic plate, but for your whole kitchen. And so, but trying to get that to be commonplace is going to be a challenge for all of us. And finally, retrofits. So if there are buildings out there that are currently not electrified, how do we get over those cost barriers to help electrify those? Those could be either older residential homes or commercial buildings that are interested in retrofitting. That's a very costly endeavor. I always use myself as an example. I really wanted to get a full heat pump. I had a 6-month-old infant at home, and our 60-year-old furnace went out because I live in a very old house here in Albuquerque. And so the temperature dropped, and I was given $20,000 for a heat pump system or $4,000 for a gas furnace. And with a 6-month-old infant, I think you can imagine what choice I made at that point. So, and if it's hard for me, then it's really hard for everyone else. And so just being really honest about that and finding ways that we can help to totally retrofit what exists into something new is a challenge that I think we can all work on. So with that, again, thank you for the time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thanks, Alaric, and thanks, Jesse and Brianna. Let me get Kathy some guidance from you. Let's see, I know we're into our break time. I was hoping we could get 10 minutes for questions of our panelists, and then at that point, we'll also capture any in the chat and follow up. Does that work for you, Kathy? And then we'll take a shorter break, perhaps.
Yep, that sounds good.
All right, so Deb, yeah, you can close the presentation. Thank you. And please raise your hand if you have questions for any of the 3 panelists from the investor-owned utilities, and we'll start with whoever. I know I see there is a lot of comment in the chat, but I don't see any particular question for the panelists here at this point there. So please raise your hand if you have a question of any of our utility reps. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks. This is, I guess, for all of them, not any utility in particular. Would it be helpful then for there to be kind of, I guess, a formalized like distribution system planning process? Like, is that something that would help lay the groundwork so that way there isn't this mad rush that overwhelms the system? Something that sets some sort of process out for how we can make sure electrification doesn't become like public enemy number 1.
Yeah, I can start, Alaric, if you want.
Yeah. No,
okay,
go ahead.
So currently, we are actually answering bench requests from the state of New Mexico on our grid modernization potential rulemaking, and then also on the idea of a DSP or an IDP. So either a distribution strategy plan or an integrated distribution plan. The challenge with that, we've kind of seen it play out with Xcel in Piesco in Minnesota, is that having those is very valuable. The information is really good, when they become litigated, it becomes very difficult to manage from the utility perspective. You have a lot of interveners going through that and nitpicking. Well, why didn't you choose that NWA analysis? And why are you doing this? And it's very challenging to go through every single decision and communicate that to a commission. Not saying we shouldn't, we should, right? But I think there's value in communicating that distribution strategy plan or that integrated distribution plan to the broader horizon so we can see the level of investment that we need to have on our system in order to accommodate some of these asks. But that being said, if we're going to present that plan, it also needs to come with a review of prudence of some sort. So if we say, here's our integrated plan, this is what we're expecting the amount of investment needed on our system, particularly close to my heart, to be able to electrify our oil area and our oil region, right? That's going to have the largest impact on emissions. If we go in and we say that, and this is the level of investment that we need, then the commission turns around and says, actually, we aren't going to approve that. It becomes very difficult then to achieve the state mandates, and they don't go hand in hand then. So that's from my perspective, yes, we are already on that path for how does GridMod integrate with an integrated distribution plan and where should those be? But from my perspective, it has to come with the ability to actually make that investment and keep it affordable for customers.
And I'll jump in with my perspective. I would say, I mean, we already do that, in my opinion, right? So we have the integrated resource plan that's filed every 3 years. What goes into that plan is all of the conversations internally as far as things like electric vehicle adoption. What are we seeing in terms of electrification? So all of that is baked into that, and that process already happens. The way that I always sort of dumb this down for myself is when people, there's a lot of like Chicken Little, right? The sky is falling, we're gonna be overrun. But what I like to remind people here in Albuquerque is like 20 or 30 years ago, Rio Rancho didn't exist, and now it does. And so that's an expansion of the system. And utilities are by nature planning institutions. And so through the IRP process and through looking at what are the adoptions of technology, what do we expect to see on the horizon, there's always an iterative process of planning for the future, planning for growth, building it out, and then managing the load. And I think really that's what utilities are here to do, and all the while delivering that safe and reliable power to customers. So, I really see a lot of this as an opportunity, and I'm always talking with my colleagues internally about what I see on the horizon, be that policy or internal programs or EV adoption rates. All of that is always communicated, and then it goes right into that resource plan, which is our 20-year, the 3-year cycle for a 20-year plan.
Jesse, do you want to comment on Michael's question about integrated planning?
Yeah, sure. Just for the sake of time, we're also participating with respect to the PRC bench requests and so forth, and also do our IRP planning process as well. So I think for the utility or for El Paso Electric for that matter, it's really just a function of the rate of adoption that's going to be the key driver in terms of how we incorporate those rates into our planning process.
Great. I see a question from Andrew and a question from Steffi. Andrew, would you like to come on camera and state your question?
Sure. NREL's always saying that the answer is not always more transmission and more distribution, but simply distributed energy resources, including ones that the utilities can manage, like PNM does out at with the block energy and stuff like that, the sort of wires alternatives, etc. And that could include, for example, people buying an induction stove with a battery that doesn't require interconnection, but is being trickle charged when there's energy, and then they don't need to upgrade their panel, like just kind of tagging on to Steffi's comment. But I see a great future for people using their cars to help with the grid. I mean, they say, oh, we'll need this many batteries and we can't build them, but yet my Tesla has the equivalent of 5 power walls in it. And so we will have the storage. It's a matter of whether or not there'll be tariffs, et cetera, that allow consumers to participate in it. And I can see that that would lead to the lowest cost grid and avoid some of the hurdles that might occur when AI chews up all the electricity on the grid, for example.
Thanks for your comment, Andrew. Let me go to Steffi's specific question about whether the utilities feel that the 100 amp service is it should be a requirement of residential homes. Is that your question, Steffi?
No, it's for if you already have 100 amps, do you need?
Oh, do you need to?
There's lots of, strategies for not upgrading, since that's such an expensive part potentially of electrification.
So what is it? What are the utility views about that? Whether or not you should have to upgrade to have capacity over 100 amps when you go electric? I know the No Building Code has some new requirements for accommodating electric vehicle charging, but are there thoughts from Brianne and Alaric and Jesse about Steffi's question?
So, I mean, I would just say that the service panel just has to be up to code. So, that's on the customer side. The customer has the service panel. So I can't say don't upgrade your service panel and plug an EV in. You have to have an electrician to go out there and do the load calcs and make sure that it's going to be safe. I will say that we're looking into some programs. There's some utilities out there that have done smart panels where you can prioritize loads and not have to do those upgrades. I think those are really interesting. That we're at the very, very early stages of that because again, it's the customer's equipment. I can't just go out and slap new service panels on everywhere. But there's technology out there that I think is really interesting. I would also say that we are piloting a managed charging program for electric vehicles. And so that'll be happening. We're about to release the RFP for that. So really excited to see that. That will help manage the load on the grid side, not on the customer side. But there is a lot of movement in that space, and I think it's definitely worth discussing, but it's pretty early stages.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback a little bit too on a couple of comments. Specifically, the SPS standard is if you're going to be doing any work on your panel, you need to bring that up to a 200 amp panel. That's kind of our standard across the board. It's when you begin retrofitting that then that cost comes in. But as far as moving forward, that's been our standard as long as I've been a design engineer. And so that's going on 9 years at this point. So we've already made great strides and lengths in that space. I do want to caution the virtual power plant and the vehicle to grid and all of those options and, charging demand. We have seen very low participation rates in those programs. There is huge customer hesitancy to allow that control of your vehicle charging. Then if we talk about moving our peaking system to a winter peaking system over a nighttime winter peaking system, well, that's when I want to charge my car at home. So when is that battery going to get charged to be able to be deployed? And then you go in the hesitancy of Winter Storm Uri, and now I don't have power. I can't charge my car, and now I can't leave because you've used the battery out of my car. I think there's a lot of hesitancy. And so I would really caution about using that as a saving grace. I think that a lot of our demand response programs work great. However, when you go to enact them, people don't like it. I don't know if anyone saw on the news when we took control of the thermostats in Piesco, I believe it was last summer or the summer before, we had people leave the program after that. So if you're going to go in and enact those things, I think that the consumer ability to choose how they want to consume electricity is also something very critical to the conversation. And vehicle to grid and VPP, while they're wonderful solutions and they're great opportunities for us to be able to reduce the impact, I think that the consumer choice is going to make those unrealistic opportunities long term, unfortunately.
Great. Thanks, Brianne. I think at this point, I don't see any hands raised. I do see some other comments in the chat that we'll follow up separately, and I'll turn the session back over to Kathy after first thanking our panelists, Brianne, Jesse, and Alaric. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us the perspective of the immense challenges that you all face as we transition this infrastructure to something we've never experienced. So thank you for being here. Kathy, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists and to Margie. We appreciate hearing the experience and what you're seeing as you're preparing the grid for what could be a pretty big demand spike. So yes, we are off time here. What I'd like to do, we have just a quick poll that we're going to put forward, and this is just to get the group from everybody a sense of where you stand on where we landed on the foundation document. And so my understanding here is that we're going to add maybe a little bit finer definition on low income, match the interim goals to the Energy Transition Act, and consider staggering the dates on those interims to a little finer gradation on prioritizing the different low income and moderate low income groups. So take a few minutes. How about if we come back at 3:05 before you sign off, if you could please answer the poll that's just up on the screen, and we will come back in 8 minutes, 7 minutes here to hear from Troy at the Mortgage Finance Authority. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring us back from our break. I appreciate everybody's understanding as we work to make sure we get through what we need to by 4 o'clock. So the poll there is on screen for you of the results. We had about 2/3 of the group answering, and looks like we are well over 80% that are either in the agree or strongly agree. So thank you. That's good feedback for us. We hope to finalize that, and we'll share with the group certainly on where we land. So at this point, I'm going to turn it on to Troy Cucchiara from the Mortgage Finance Authority, and we'll pull up his slides in just a second. Troy is the Green Initiatives Manager for MFA. He helps administer the Department of Energy's weatherization program for the state, and have asked him, we are in infrastructure mode today, so we've heard from the utilities, and now we also want to hear the state of the housing stock for New Mexico residents. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you, Kathy. Before we start, I would like to kind of set the mental stage for this, and we're going to do a little bit of a thought experiment. And so, as we go through these demographics and housing statistics, you could memorize some of them. They're interesting. It's cool, but the thing is, these are just numbers, and they're not going to mean anything unless we actually do something to put them to work. So what I'd like to do is to ask you to think of the demographic that you fall into and shift yourself temporarily into a different demographic. And we're looking at the first slide. This is not all we're going to talk about. There's different housing demographics, of course. So if you are low income, shift yourself into a higher income demographic, as an example. If you are middle income, shift yourself to a low income. If you live in a site belt, think about what it's like to be in a mobile home for the duration of the first part of this segment. And the reason for that is we want to try and exercise a little bit of what is it like to be on the other side of things. And the reason why this is important is because we're talking about electrification. And as we do this, it's important to have a realization that not everybody has the same abilities as everyone else. So in addition to this shift, try and think of the electrification item or decarbonization activity that you would like to do, that you've been wanting to do, or perhaps you've already done, and what the cost of that item was. When you make your shift into a different demographic, think about what it would take to make this happen, your electrification item. So in other words, somebody had mentioned 20,000 for a heat pump earlier. If that's what your quote is to have a heat pump installed in your house, and you figured out how to make that work through loans or whatever, shift yourself to a different demographic and think about how that would change things. As we go through this, I guarantee that'll make it a little bit more interesting for you. Profile of New Mexico. Cost burden is paying more than 30% of your income towards housing costs. Severely cost burden is 50%. And if you have an idea of what that would be like, think of what your paychecks are and paying almost half or more than half of that check towards housing costs. In 2023, 28% of New Mexicans were cost burdened, and 43% of renters. That's a high number. New Mexico has a predominant and traditional sector that has a household income of $58,000 compared to the national average of $75,000. And in terms of households with seniors, almost 34% of the households in the state have seniors residing in them. Next slide, please. For our housing stock, what's interesting here is single family housing is 65% of our stock, while mobile homes are 15%. And the reason why that's important is if any of you have lived in a mobile home or are familiar with them, they tend to fall apart a lot more quickly, with the exception of some of the newer built mobile homes, meaning that this is going to be a challenging segment for us to address when it comes to electrification. Homes that are built before 1980 is 43% of our housing stock. That's huge. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out why that's important in terms of what we're trying to do here. In addition to that, another 33% are between 1980 and 1999. That's significant because in 1993 is the Energy Policy Act, and that's when we started seeing greater energy efficiency measures with homes. What this tells us is not only do we have an old housing stock, but the majority of the housing stock has not initiated energy efficiency items when those homes are being built. Next slide, please. As far as manufactured housing stock, the county that has the highest amount of mobile homes is Orange County. I don't know if anybody would have ever guessed that. A second to Sierra County and Mota County. And these three counties also have a huge amount of poverty. If you take a look at the median price of a mobile home compared to single family, this will also tell you something about the income of the people that typically end up having to live in mobile homes. 15% of our housing stock is mobile homes. If you compare that to the national average, it's quite a bit different. Next slide, please. If we look at the amount of renters versus homeowners, you'll see that New Mexico is primarily a homeowner state. However, the cost burden hits the renting segment more heavily. The living cost burden does. So if you're renting and you do that demographic shift to a homeowner, now you have the ability, because it's your home, to electrify or to get that item that you've been wanting for so long, but you may not have the income for it. These are the kind of things that we need to start thinking about. The median gross rent for New Mexico is $966 versus the median gross mortgage is $2,861. Now here's something that's troublesome. Our income has increased by 7.4% in 2022. Now, this is right at the end of COVID, so that might have a big part to this. The average home price has actually increased by almost 17%. What does that tell us about the number of people, particularly Gen Z, that might be forced to rent as opposed to buying a home? Next slide, please. If you look at the percentage of people that are cost burdened in New Mexico, it is mind-blowing. For homeowners, it's almost 29% of cost burden, and for renters, it's 44% of people that pay more than 30% of their cost towards their rent. Next slide. Households of seniors. If you don't know the counties, that dark square right there, that's Catron County. And so Catron County has a huge amount of seniors, as does Sierra County and Harding. And again, these are the counties that also have a huge amount of poverty in relation to some of the other counties in the state. What that tells us is this is a demographic of people that need our help the most, and with whatever we can do. Next slide, please. Disability, we have the same pattern, except this time it's Catron County and again Mota. Now, how can it be 114% is probably what the question is, and that is because the number of people living in the household exceeds one. So if so 114% would be more houses in the county, or more people within the household in the county have disability, because it's actually number of households and household members that make up that number. And next slide. Our homeless population, as you might have guessed, is pretty high for New Mexico. What I find disturbing about these numbers is that of the homeless population, 26.8% of these homeless people are families of children. It's not always this person made bad decisions. It's not always, well, they're just mentally ill. That does take up a percentage of some of the homeless people. However, these are human beings and they're in the situation and they have children. There's children that make bad decisions. They're in the situation and there's no way they can get out of it without the help of somebody. 44% are chronically homeless and 6.7% are veterans. That's insanely high. So those are some numbers about our housing stocks. And I hope that you're able to kind of think through what it would be like to be in a demographic that is not your own, including what it's like to be homeless and what steps you would take to get to the next level if you were in those situations. Next slide, please. As the Green Initiatives Manager, I operate the Weatherization Assistance Program for New Mexico. Weatherization, by definition, is reducing energy costs for low-income households by increasing the energy efficiency of their homes while ensuring their health and safety. Now, it's important that this definition is remembered because as we get into the electrification dialogues, the term weatherization is thrown around a lot. And it's not really for the demographic that is not low income. However, you can carry on energy efficiency and weatherization activities in those households. But the term usually encompasses low income and has the health and safety rider with it. Next slide, please. To make it simple and to memorize what measures go into weatherization, you can break it down into these subcategories. One is mechanical. If you were a site inspector, you would loop all of these things into the mechanical. Cooling, heating, water heating. Sometimes water heating can go into the base load measures. Health and safety is the other category. Building shell is insulation and air sealing. And base load basically means what appliances will be on, will not be changing seasonally. Refrigerators, light bulbs, water heating, those are the kinds of things that are base loads. But if you can break it down to these four categories, then you'll remember all the items that go into weatherization. Next slide, please. Here's something else to remember because it's important if you do talk to people that think there might be borderline qualification for weatherization. Must be below 200% of the poverty level. If you could just remember that, then it'll be easy to do a Google search and find out what that number is for whoever it is that you're talking to. Also, the applicant must own or rent their home. It can't be an RV. And they need to have some sort of utility bill. And we need to know that the home is not going to be scheduled for demolition. Next slide, please. How soon do people get weatherized when they go through our system? It's not first in, first out. It is by vulnerability. So people who are disabled, elderly, or households with children, those are the ones that are serviced first. Also, we look at high energy burden, which means propane users. Those are the low-hanging fruit for electrification because they're spending a lot of their income on utility in addition to their living expenses. Next slide, please. I'm trying to be aware of the time to keep it in 15 minutes. The 5 simple steps. And again, I got this so that you can memorize as much as possible and repeat this to people that you might be talking with. You want to find the client. In addition to finding the client, somewhere between that and rehabilitation, you need to do some sort of an assessment, energy audit. That's what's going to determine, of course, what the home needs. Most of the homes that we see that fall into that older housing stock are going to need some sort of rehabilitation and or repair. That's a very important step because if you put yourself into that low-income demographic and you really want that heat pump, there's a realization that will take place. And that realization is a lot of these homes, and your home might need roof repair. which would be a priority over a heat pump because that is devastating people's lives. So that's why the rehabilitation repair is so important. And then we do full energy efficiency measures. That's the second step. It's more important to do that before you do any kind of electrification. And then we get our heat pumps in there with the natural gas backup where applicable. And then solar is the icing. That's what we want to do last to get people set up with the entire package. Next slide, please. We have our map coverage. There is one more service provider that is not on this map that just won a procurement that will be starting in July, and that is a Red Feather Development, and they are in the Navajo Nation, which is going to be in San Juan, McKinley, and somewhat in Cibola and Sandoval counties. These are the three service providers that run the weatherization program for us. And I just wanted to see if anybody has a guess before we go to the next slide as to how many households in New Mexico qualify for weatherization. Any wild guesses? 85%, 25% is a little closer. So the actual number that we're looking for, next slide, please. 178,000. A little closer to the 25% number. That is a lot of households that can use the services. And that is, I think I took 16 minutes, and I will pass it over to Kathy to run the question and answer if need be.
Thank you, Troy. Appreciate your time and appreciate the awareness for the time. One question already, and I invite others to go ahead and raise your hand, and we can take a few minutes here to ask some questions. Coming from Camilla, specific numbers of how many homes and families have been served. So of the 178,000.
Yeah, and I'll just put some context. I know in the 2022 legislative session in HB2, there were $10 million earmarked for this type of weatherization and energy efficiency work. And I'd like to know how much of those funds have been used and for how many homes.
For right now, we're looking at about 13,000 homes since the inception of the program have been weatherized. The money that you're talking about that have been earmarked, that I believe that's going to different programs. If we're talking about the Department of Energy weatherization portion, that's what we use. We use utility money and that portion and some state money. So from the time that we started tracking this, which was 96 until present, we're looking at 13,000 homes.
And maybe like in the last 3 years, how many homes?
We're averaging about 800 homes per year. So about 2,500.
Okay, and then do you use a contractor, a third-party contractor to deliver those services? And if so, who is that?
Yeah, so the very last the slide before the 178,000, those are our service providers. Those are nonprofits, and they have in-house crews, and they also contract out to subcontractors. So we don't contract to contractors directly because of past provisions of the federal dollar. We want to make sure that the CAAs or nonprofit agencies are carrying through all the federal regulations that were required. So it's a little trickier, but it's worth it.
Thank you.
Troy, I also see in Camilla's question, I know we heard last meeting that there was an extensive wait list. Do you have a need for more funding?
Yes, and this is the discussion that Carl and I were just having prior to this call earlier today. The basic question, and this is national, is it a funding problem or is it a workforce problem? And every region is a little different. For New Mexico, we're not struggling with our workforce problem right now. Of course, during the height of COVID, everybody was. And that's, we definitely needed more people on the ground at that point, but right now we're not. So at this point in time, it is a funding issue. If our existing providers are not able to handle additional funding, then we would release an RFP for either something specific that they aren't doing or another geographical region, which is it's not easy to do, but it's also not easy to give money back that's earmarked for the program. So we'd rather see that those funds go to the appropriate contractors to get the items into these households and get these people where they need to be.
Thank you. I'm also just pulling from the chat here a question from Alice. Do you track the KWH savings? Any metrics that you can share?
We track savings on both the KWH and the therm level. And so we would have to convert that to MMBTU because the different measures have, of course, there's natural gas, propane, and electric, and we track it differently. I can give you something real quick. Let's see.
Perhaps
But
it's
I have
something we could
something-
share with the group after the meeting.
Yeah, it's going to take some doing. I can crunch those numbers, but I don't have it offhand. I thought I did.
Okay. Perhaps something we can put on the next steps, and if you're willing to share with us, we'll circulate it to the group. Thank you,
Sure,
Alice.
yes.
And then one last question, and we'll keep moving. Approximately how much money is that per home served?
So right now, every penny that has gone into the program, including admin, capital outlay, training and technical assistance, rehabilitation, you name it, our average is, I do keep track of these numbers. Our running total is 14,763. And that is since I started tracking it in 2017.
Wow. Thank you. And just to wrap up here, I also see a question in the chat from Gabe asking of how MFA will use the seed award money. Could I invite you to maybe address that at our program showcase next meeting and what plans you might have for that?
Sure.
That would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Troy. We really appreciate your time and your insights and the data that you're bringing to the group here to help us better understand the need and specific customer segments that this work might address. Appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
time.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, folks, for staying with us. We are going to move to the last portion of the agenda here, the brainstorm and discussion. I know it is getting late. This is where we really want to hear from you all and get your input. So Deb has just dropped into the chat here. This is a preliminary list of barriers, and we pulled this from the discussion at the afternoon at our kickoff after we toured the apartments. Folks put some stickies around the room of what do they see as barriers. And our goal here is to start to identify the building blocks. So if we can figure out the barriers, figure out where the group really wants to focus in, and then the actions that we might develop from that. So I would encourage you, if you have a second screen handy, to pull up that preliminary list. We've got them in several different categories, and that was our grouping just for the sake of ease of categorizing. So I'm going to pull up the next step. What we'd like to do is to ask you all to take a look at these barriers. We've pulled that from our stickies and add to it. Take a few minutes here to go off camera, go ahead and scratch it up and write your ideas based on what you've heard today of grid readiness, housing needs, what you know from your own experience in your own work and personal life. How would you expand or revise this preliminary list? So first group is financial, some of the upfront costs, some of the availability, customer understanding of the incentives. On the infrastructure, we just heard quite a bit from 4 different utilities of grid readiness and infrastructure investment. Another group is on customer outreach, awareness, education. So that effective communication, changing mindsets. Workforce, working with contractors, and again, contractor education and willingness to work with new products, new appliances. Regulatory, so I think the grid planning consideration, rate design, some of the concerns of capturing the energy efficiency benefits and having the incentives aligned. Scale of, this was, I think we heard today with our presenters, of recognizing that small commercial and residential may not be the biggest bang for the buck for greenhouse gas emission reduction, but we have focused in here on where folks work and live as a primary way to incent folks to take a look at emission reduction. And then land use. And this one was pretty specific to rooftop versus utility scale solar, and being aware of urban sprawl and development appropriately. So I'm going to ask you, it's 3:30. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Let's go to 3:35. Quiet, focused time here to add your ideas, and then we'll come back. And ideally, I'd like to go through our whole list. I think we probably have too many participants today, but to contribute your ideas, what we can't capture here together, we'll certainly ask you to put into the chat or to follow with an email with us, and as the beginning of our roadmap direction. Any questions before I set you off? Adam, the link is there for you. If you scroll up, Deb has dropped it in.
I'm sorry, who dropped it?
Deborah Shields.
Deborah.
Under GridWorks.
Okay, it's not showing up on mine for some, oh, right. That's the barrier?
Yes, that should be the preliminary list of barriers. So that's what you see, similar to what you see in the screen. I just have some placeholders here for when we go to discuss. So take a couple minutes, think about your ideas. Camille, if you can find a piece of scratch paper or whatever is handy to you, if you have the agenda printed out, go ahead and put it on the back. The different categories there, if that helps to prompt your thinking. So we'll return in a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to bring us back together. I see some ideas coming into the chat, and recognize that we are a big group here. We're going to go ahead and try to capture what we can, and offer the chance to do some chat or written comments afterwards if we aren't able to get through our full group. So I am going to just take you down the list here. So be prepared. I am calling on people, so hopefully you have some ideas. Luis, you are our first person on our list. So if I could ask you to come up and a suggestion, where do you see a barrier? If you could tell us which topic you're in, and go ahead and tell us your thoughts.
So I'm in the customer outreach and awareness education.
Thank you.
And so I don't know if I was thinking so much in a barrier, but how to, in the kind of, it's point 3, how to make it a more effective communication through tools that like utilities already have, to break down those, newsletters. We have a lot of publications, and also think it's always important to communicate in the way the member wants to be communicated, right? So I was looking at it in that way. Kathy, is how do we overcome some of these barriers to make it an effective program?
Great, thank you. Susan Nadell, I think you're up next, and then I'm going to come to Adam.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think my hand was up.
I'm calling on people, Susan. We're trying to hear from
sorry.
everybody. So if you have
Yeah,
an idea,
I
if you'd prefer to.
Yeah, I appreciate to watch and listen, but thank you.
Thank you. Yep, and that is of course an option as well. If you would prefer to pass, please say so. Adam.
Yeah, I'm in the regulatory.
Okay.
And I think that the regulatory, or the lack of programs or requirements to incentivize the adoption of these technologies, or provide benefits for folks to adopt these technologies, I think is the biggest barrier, in my opinion.
Thank you. You may notice a pattern here. I'm in the A's. So Alaric, you're up next, and then I'll move on to Alejandra.
Sorry about that. I was on a phone call. I apologize.
You want to take a pass? Sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to take a pass. Sorry, I was on a phone during this part.
Nope, that's fine. And if you have thoughts later, please drop them into the chat or send us an email. Alejandra, and then I'm going to move on to Alexis.
So maybe take my thoughts with a word of salt, because I am not a New Mexico expert. But I always go back to the people problem. And that's both on the workforce and the next to it, the customer outreach and awareness. Just getting the people on both ends of that transaction excited about the technology.
Thank you. Alexis, and then Alice, we're headed to you next.
I was also looking at customer outreach and awareness. I was thinking more about New Mexico's landscape and the psychology of poverty, and trying to communicate to someone to prioritize things that don't seem like a basic necessity when basic necessities are already so hard to attain.
Thank you. Alice, and then on to Andrew.
Yeah, I also am a big fan of education and outreach. But yeah, I like to take a kind of a marketing and behavioral psychology approach to it. And I'd love to incorporate in this strategy solutions to address issues of our inherent laziness and interest and comfort. Because a lot of there's definitely a component of wanting your homes to be safe, but also, I think there's also a challenge when you just crank up your AC to ridiculous degrees in the summertime just to be luxurious.
Okay. Okay. So some of that behavioral psychology.
Yeah, we can leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you. Andrew, and then Anne, you're up next.
I'm on regulatory too, and the misalignment of incentives in monopoly utilities. For example, they make their return on building big infrastructure, and yet sometimes small is beautiful. And so getting everybody's incentives aligned isn't going to be an important way to overcome that. But we have another barrier, which is the slow pace of regulatory and the long lead times, especially when we have technological improvements. So another crazy barrier, I don't know where it goes, is that every utility in the country and co-op are now fighting for the same equipment. And so lead times are getting to be really huge for everybody. And we don't have the volume here in New Mexico to that other states might have and other larger utilities might have. So I don't know how you want to capture that, but.
Yep. Yep. Thank you. Equipment availability. Let's see. Anne, I'm sorry. Anne, you're up next, and then Camilla.
All right, this is great. I'm not sure if I can add anything per se. I think you captured the financial. I think that one was really important. Understanding all of this stacking and grading ability. And I just think that's the way to go. That's, if we can untangle that, then we get people, we win people over, we win their trust. I think you, everything else on the list, I agree with.
Great. Thank you. Camilla, oh, maybe it looks like she must have dropped.
No, I'm here. I'm here.
You're there. Oh, great. Okay. And then on to, I'm sorry, is it Kara or Kara Lynch next? Camilla?
Great, thank you. I am not sure which of these categories this goes in, but I think that there's an obstacle that I sometimes hear from home builders where they'll say, oh, these upfront additional costs, are going to make housing too expensive. And I think that for me, at least, that's a real misnomer. When you are, let's deal with buying a new home, and let's say you're even middle to lower middle income, the cost for some of these technologies absorbed into your mortgage is pennies on the dollar when it comes to paying your monthly mortgage. But the benefits are so high, that your home can actually be warm in every part of it or cool in every part of it. And that, your savings because of the efficiencies of the home building when it comes to insulation or whatever else, the benefits so much outweigh the costs, especially in the long term. And especially if we can properly deploy either the utility, the state, or the federal benefits and stack them really well, use the green bank, etc. So it's not a customer issue, it's more of a home builder issue. And there is an attitude towards low income rights to a comfortable home that I find very objectionable. Every human deserves a comfortable place to live. And as a society, we have to manage that. And the cost to the utilities of the impact of weather like this is much more significant than the drive or the cost of electrification. So I think we really need to balance some of the facts, whether they be science and climate facts or cost facts, to make it understood that kids and elderly people, all of us are suffering from the impacts of climate change right now. And every person, including low-income people, deserve the opportunity to live in a comfortable place. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Kara, I'm sorry.
It's Kara.
Kara, and then we're going to go on to Carl. So Kara.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. I agree with the comments that Camilla and others made throughout this meeting. I'd only add that, there was one slide, I'm forgetting the MFA representative's name, Troy, where I think it showed something like 69% of all New Mexicans or households use gas for heating their homes. And so, I think my primary area would be in the regulatory quadrant. I really think there should be stronger regulation of our gas utilities so that they also have to meet renewable portfolio standards. And I forget who made the comment, but our utilities right now are incentivized to build capital projects, and they're also incentivized to build more. So, when it comes to housing, the gas company is, or the gas utility is incentivized to build more pipeline to new builds, for example, and there is no incentive to remove any gas pipelines. So I'm not sure what the solution is right now. I just say that's a barrier.
Thank you. Thank you. And I was on to Carl, please. And then after that, I have Dana.
Hi, thank you. I have two components. One is for the consumer outreach. I think that the energy audit component of the IRA grants that are going to be it's a required component. I think consumers are going to glance over that and think about not doing it and not understanding the requirement of that. And then also the benefit of having that energy audit in terms of what they think they might need versus what the reality or the science tells them what they need that could best benefit their home. And one of those things could be something simple as just adding some more insulation or tightening up of your envelope, which are measures that are relatively inexpensive. And then that could lead to the next phase, which is like a heat pump transition to a heat pump, and then being able to go to a smaller variant versus a larger variant when you have a leaky home, right? So I think there's going to be some more outreach needed for consumers, and then they're going to have sticker shock, right? Because energy audits are not free right now. There is a $150 tax credit to offset the cost of that energy audit, but I think there could potentially be some more participation from utilities or other rebate providers to help offset the cost of that energy audit, because that's going to be something people are just not going to be accustomed to hearing about or needing to pay for. The second thing is the workforce, as Troy put into his one of his graphics about the New Mexico gas or the natural gas high percentage of homeowners, that leads directly to the HVAC workforce. They're trained in large masses to think about gas heating appliances and not heat pumps. Back east, they've been using heat pumps for many years, and they're accustomed to hearing that term and understanding how they work. Over here, we're not. There's very, very little participation in heat pumps. So we have to consider upskilling our existing workforce to embrace heat pumps and not think about the old heat pumps that would only work down to about 32 degrees and start diminishing. The new technology now will work, well below zero and be very efficient at the same time. So that's what I'm doing. I work at Santa Fe Community College Energy Smart Academy, and we have some training programs right now for heat pump and energy auditing that we're trying to get some funnels of individuals to come over and take that training and be able to participate in this movement.
Thank you, Carl. We greatly appreciate you bringing that workforce perspective to the group. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
On to Dana and then Daniel.
Yeah, I was thinking for workforce, with electrification efforts increasing, looking to potentially convert oil and gas industry workers towards building decarbonization positions.
Thank you. Daniel.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, just a couple observations. I think, to reiterate what Carl was saying, I think the challenge, the sort of momentum behind gas in the construction industries and the development community is a huge challenge. I was working on a big master plan community approval, and we built into that an electric only requirement. And there was an immediate sort of pushback from the development community around like, well, that's not how we do it. You're not going to be able to recruit production builders. That kind of thing. So I think definitely my other experience with that was building all electric solar multifamily project, and the big contractors that build affordable housing are not used to working with these, and their subs are not used to working with ducted heat pumps and things like that. And so, and designers, right? Like how do you do a hybrid hot water heater? How do you put it in a non-conditioned space? These sort of, not creating feedback loops with your heating systems. So like there's a huge need, I think, to address the workforce and capacity issues and just the momentum behind, doing gas because it's easy and it's cheap, and getting the workforce and the development community educated about it. I think the other thing that just like we've got to just address is that like heat pumps are amazing, but they do cost more. There's just no way around that. And especially for the lowest income people, it's like probably an untenable burden. And for a lot of folks, you're going from gas heat that, maybe 50, 60 bucks a month, in peak winter months is going to go up 30, almost 50% probably. And you couple that with like, maybe they don't have cooling loads in the summer because they don't have AC currently, but you're adding a new energy cost in the summer. So if we this stuff it seems relatively small, 30 bucks a month here, but when we're talking about lower income folks, if we're not pairing that stuff with solar, or there's a big gap between when you install the heat pumps and when you install the solar and when the solar is commissioned, which is the other challenge, right? The gap in time between when folks get credit for their solar production. Those are all, actual real problems for folks that we've got to address. That this is a higher cost system. If we can get them solar, sure, that'll wipe that out. But when we're just doing electrification without solar, low or no cost solar, then we're actually creating some financial barriers for folks.
Thank you. Drew Jones. I'm going to take Drew and then Jake Thompson. And I apologize to those of you in the back end of the alphabet. We'll come back to you here shortly. But Drew and then Jake Thompson, please.
Thanks, Kathy. And I'll be real quick. I think what was coming top of my mind, and I've heard a couple other people talk about gas, so I would think it would fall under infrastructure or regulatory, but I think the ability for the gas company to continue to collect, to install brand new furnaces year after year through their energy efficiency programs would be a barrier. Each furnace that's installed represents another 20, 25 years of a commitment from that customer. So I think closing that out sooner than later would make a lot of sense as far as barriers.
Thank you. And Jake, to close us out, just due to time constraints, please.
Thanks, Kathy. I don't really have anything at this point. I appreciate all the contributions everybody's made. So
Sure.
we can
Thank
close it
you.
out by saying great job.
Thank you. All right. And apologies to those of you who are at the second half of the alphabet. I see many of you dropping ideas into the chat. Please do so. Keep doing that. If you wrote down your idea and you can just drop it in quickly, please go ahead and do that now. What I'd like to close us out, if Deb, if you can pull up our last slide, please. Thank you all for sticking with us and sharing some great ideas, what we intend to do. So just as far as wrap up here, our objectives for today. So we talked quite a bit on the foundations and looks like we are headed in the right direction. So we as a team will do a final draft and run that through by email so folks can have a final say. We talked through grid readiness and heard from our 4 presenters. Appreciate Troy's time on housing stock and some of the insights on the age and the demographics of renters and owners and within some of the different counties. And now just the brainstorming of the barriers to decarbonization. So lots of good ideas that were coming out that we will capture. They're still coming in through the chat. So excited to see all of that. And we'll pull that together for the group, put it in writing and get that to you before the next meeting. So next steps here. This group has agreed to meet the second Wednesday of the month through November. I will note that we are not meeting in August, hopefully in deference to summer plans and summer breaks. So our next meeting is July 10th. We'll do that 1 to 4 p.m. again, and we'll keep that virtual. That seems to be a good process for us. And then as far as action items today, Carmen, I greatly appreciate your understanding here. We will come back to you at the next meeting. We have some work as a team to do to finish up the foundations and pull together the barriers. Please keep sending them along. And then lastly, for you all, here is the link for the sign up form that we would ask if you are interested in this program showcase. So if you would like 2 minutes at our next meeting to highlight a program or a rebate or a workforce incentive that you are doing, thinking about providing, have in the field that you would like this very diverse and wide-ranging group to hear about, please sign up for that showcase by June 28th. No slides, just a quick 2-minute lightning round from anybody who's interested to really get a chance to hear what else is happening around the state. And with that, if you have questions, both my email and Margie's is on there. I know Deb has also been sending materials. So if you didn't get a chance to share your ideas or you have thoughts that we haven't yet captured, or you feel we maybe didn't capture as thoroughly or correctly as you would like, please drop us an email. We will be doing a meeting summary and providing the presentations, posting that on the webpage, so you can also look for that, and a summary email from us to come in the next few days. And with that, we actually finished a little 2 minutes early, but I'll give you some time, recognizing that I took more of your break than was intended. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you and hearing what great programs you're doing on July 10th. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Kathy, let's go ahead and leave the Zoom meeting open for another 5 minutes. I see people are still adding ideas into the chat. So let's just give that a little time in case people want to catch up with their latest ideas.
Yep. Great. And we're happy to stay on too. If you just want to give it to us individually, it's certainly welcome to do that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. For folks who are staying on, do you want to keep going? Do you have barrier ideas or input for us, feedback? go.